Okay. So now we get to the Levites. The Levites were excluded from the rest of these groups for a reason. They are not going to be part of the army. They are not included in the military census. They have a special role that is separate from all the rest. This is the account of the family of, and there's that account again, by the way. That goes all the way back to Genesis. Remember that? This is the account of, or these are the family records of, these are the genealogies of. Okay, so we're still following these accounts, these family records, these genealogies. This is the account, I have to say, I will say this right here. I am glad, very glad, that I don't live in a culture that is so heavily bound to the family records. Okay, we don't have this concept really in our culture, and most of us can't trace our family records back more than a couple of generations at most. A lot of us today are here in this country because at some point in the past, someone decided they wanted a break from their past, wanted a break from their family records, and came here. And the vast majority of us today can't trace our family records back any farther than a couple generations. I can trace the family records back about 100 years, maybe a little bit more in my mother's case, and that's about it. These people trace their family records back a long time. A long, long time. And they mattered a lot to these people. This is the account of the family of Aaron and Moses at the time the Lord talked with Moses on Mount Sinai. So there was a lot of talking going on when they were on Mount Sinai. Numbers is a weird book. Before I get into this, I do want to say something else about Numbers, which I probably should have included in my introduction to Numbers, but I didn't. I just overlooked it, forgot it. Numbers is a weird book in a lot of ways. It has, like I said earlier, it has a little bit of everything in it. It has, of course, all these numbers. It has some narrative. It has some instructions. It has some teaching. It has some law. It's not arranged chronologically. It's kind of, there's a lot of kind of wandering, and they are wandering here. So there is kind of a lot of circuitous wandering in the text. And it's another one of those books where it's kind of hard to tell like when parts of it were written and how they were patched together. I mentioned earlier, I mentioned many times now that the smart people will tell you, there's a lot of repetition in Numbers, as there is in all the works of Moses. The smart people will tell you this is because this is 2 or 3 different written accounts patched together like a patchwork quilt at some later point in history. I think it's just because the guy, whoever it was, Moses, potentially maybe a later editor, arranged it this way for the sake of repeating it over and over and over again. But it can be somewhat hard to tell, in Numbers in particular, more so than the other books, like when some of this stuff would have been written and who would have recounted it. Because we are, later on at least, not necessarily here, but later on we are going to be bumping up pretty close to the end of Moses' lifetime. And there are some sections, some sentences, maybe even passages in this book that may have been actually written down by somebody else instead of Moses. It could be that some of this stuff was recorded by Joshua or some other kind of secretary, either as it was happening or after it happened and included with the works of Moses. Because there is a lot of stuff in this book. Now, Deuteronomy is going to be pretty obviously, it's almost basically Moses' autobiography. Of all the works, of all the 5 books of Moses, Deuteronomy is the one that's most self-evidently Moses' own work, which is ironic that it's the one that today, the smart people say probably was the least likely to be written by him. We'll get to that when we get to that. But Numbers is probably the one that might have the most non-Moses material in it, just because of the way the book does seem to be kind of a smorgasbord of all kinds of different material gathered during or at the end of their years of wandering. Anyway, we'll talk about that kind of as we go and get to certain sections. So here we are back on Mount Sinai, like we were in Leviticus and Exodus. I mean, we haven't really left yet. The story of them leaving comes along a few chapters from now, so we're still basically there. But this is being written very similarly to those other sections where the Lord was speaking to Moses while they were still on the mountain. Hmm. I'm sorry, I'm just... Oh well, moving on. The names of the sons of Aaron were Nadab the firstborn and Abihu. Eleazar and Ithamar, that's probably their birth order. We now know that Nadab was the firstborn. And Nadab and Abihu. These were the names of Aaron's sons, the anointed priests, who were ordained to serve as priests. Nadab and Abihu, however, fell dead before the Lord when they made an offering with unauthorized fire before him in the desert of Sinai. They had no sons. They may have been too young to have sons at that point. Who knows? I mean, Aaron himself would have been 83 at that time. So you'd think his sons would have been married and had their own sons, but they didn't for some reason. They had no sons, so only Eleazar and Ithamar served as priests during the lifetime of their father Aaron. Aaron's going to die not too long from now. I mean, 40 years later. But, this is going to be during the lifetime of Aaron, which will basically entirely... one thing, before I go any further, Moses never made it to the Promised Land. Aaron never made it to the Promised Land. And so a lot of the initial instructions Moses gets, from the time, really, we first met him, or the time they first left Egypt until now, is going to be about them while they're wandering, during their wilderness years, while they're camping. The instructions are going to change a little bit once they actually get into the land. And part of the reason why some of these laws and some of these teachings are stated multiple times is that you have one set of teachings that apply primarily to their years in the wilderness, and then sometimes some of those laws or teachings get altered slightly once they actually get into the land, so then they get stated again with additional instructions or something pertaining to them actually living in the land. The Lord said to Moses, "Bring the tribe of Levi, and present them to Aaron the priest to assist him. They are to perform duties for him and for the whole community at the tent of meeting, by doing the work of the tabernacle. They are to take care of all the furnishings of the tent of meeting, fulfilling the obligations of the Israelites by doing the work of the tabernacle. Give the Levites to Aaron and his sons. They are the Israelites who are to be given wholly to him. Appoint Aaron and his sons to serve as priests." We've already seen them do that. "Anyone else who approaches the sanctuary must be put to death." Okay, so let's talk a little bit here. Aaron and Moses were from the tribe of Levi. So you go back to the 12 sons of Jacob, and Aaron and Moses come from Levi. So they were Levites in that sense. Aaron's family specifically were the priests. So Moses and Aaron both came from the same parents. And it'll be Aaron's sons, and then their sons after them that will be the priests, and only that family, only those people, only male descendants of Aaron will be priests. Nobody else will be a priest in Old Testament Israel, and that's going to be a very, very, very strict rule that they're going to follow, and will have pretty harsh penalties. As he just said here, anybody who approaches the sanctuary, anybody else must be like you are not to do the priest's work if you're not a priest. And you're only a priest. You only have that function. You're only in that role if you are a male descendant of Aaron. That's it. No other people group got that distinction. But there is a greater tribe of Levites around them. Aaron, not even Moses' family could be priests. Like Moses was not a priest. Moses' sons were not priests. Okay, but they were both, Moses and Aaron brothers, of course. They were both the tribe of Levi. So the rest of the tribe of Levi were to assist the priests. They were basically the blue-collar workers who did everything else so the priests wouldn't have to. The priests focused on the sacrifices and the rituals, and also diagnosing the clean and unclean and the stuff that they were supposed to do as laid out in Leviticus. The Levites were basically their assistants, essentially doing all the blue-collar work so that the priests didn't have to. And you couldn't do that unless you were a Levite. Okay, that was also something different. All right, you could not do any of that stuff unless you were a Levite. That was a specific role given to the rest of the Levites, the male Levites and the rest of that tribe. They were all part of the tribe of Levi, but you had the priests who were the sons of Aaron, and then you had everybody else who came from Levi. And again, just like with the priests, nobody other than a male descendant of Aaron could be a priest. Nobody else other than the male descendants of Levi could be Levites. And there is a distinction in the scripture between the priests and the Levites, even though the priests themselves came from Levi. So in our minds, we would think of them as all being Levites, but in the terminology of the scriptures, there's going to be a clear distinction between the priests and the Levites. We have to make sure we know that. The Lord also said to Moses, I have taken the Levites from among the Israelites in place of the first male offspring of every Israelite woman. The Levites are mine, for all the firstborn are mine. When I struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, I set apart for myself every firstborn in Israel, whether man or animal. They are to be mine. I am the Lord. So the price for Israel's freedom was the death of the firstborn of all the Egyptians. And God's payment that he's extracting from Israel for that is Israel's own firstborn. But he's going to take the Levites in place of those firstborn. We're going to talk a little bit more explain this a little bit more as we go through here, but just keep that in mind. We'll explain this a little bit more in depth as we go through this section, but keep this in mind. The price of Israel's freedom from Egypt was the deaths of all the firstborn of Egypt, human and cattle, man and animal, man and beast. The price that God is making Israel pay for that is their own firstborn. Again, of male, man and beast, man or animal. But he is going to take the Levites instead. He's going to take the Levites in place of the firstborn of all the rest of Israel. So that's why they're being set apart from the rest. Remember, there's constantly that set apart idea. You take a group of people out of a crowd, or you separate something as special and holy compared to the common. That's that principle of consecration or set apartness. It's been in play from the beginning, and it's still in play now. But we'll talk a bit more about this as we go. The Lord said to Moses in the desert of Sinai, count the Levites by their families and clans. So now we are counting the Levites. They're being sent. They have their own census now. Count every male a month old or more. It's not just 20 years, because they're not being signed up for military service. This is every male a month old or more. So why a month? Probably because the infant mortality rate was so high in that day and time that you might not have, it's like you probably had to wait a month to see if the child was going to make it. Remember how Moses was born and said that his mother saw the child was healthy? And it probably means along the lines of, it looks like he's going to make it. He's going to survive. He's going to make it out of infancy, because a lot of them didn't. The infant mortality rate was very high in this day and time. And that would be true for much of human history, actually. So my guess is that the month-old requirement, they were consecrated on the 8th day, but it doesn't say that. It doesn't say 8 days old or more. So my guess is that the month-old requirement has to do with simply the fact that a month old, you're more likely assured the child is going to survive. There could be something to do with the purification process. It doesn't say that, though. And I think it's probably just a matter of, practically speaking, if a child makes it a month, he's got a better than likely average of making it longer than that. So Moses counted them as he was commanded by the word of the Lord. These are the names of the sons of Levi. So more genealogies. Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. These are the names of the Gershonite clans, Libni and Shimei. The Kohathite clans, Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uziel. The Merari clans, Mali and Mushi. These are the Levi clans, according to their families. To Gershon belong the clans of the Libnites and Shemites. These are the Gershonite clans. The number of all the males a month old or more who were counted was 7,500. The Gershonite clans were to camp on the west, behind the tabernacle. The leader of the families of the Gershonites was Eliasaph, son of Lael. At the tent of meeting, the Gershonites were responsible for the care of the tabernacle and the tent, its coverings, the curtain at the entrance to the tent of meeting, the curtains of the courtyard, the curtain at the entrance to the courtyard surrounding the tabernacle and altar, and the ropes, and everything related to their use. So they took care of the fabrics and the materials that actually made up the tabernacle, the tent. To Kohath belonged the clans of the Amramites, Israelites, Hebronites, and Uzzielites. These are the Kohathite clans. The number of all the males a month old or more was 8,600. There's a footnote down here that says some manuscripts say 8,300. The Kohathites are responsible for the care of the sanctuary. The Kohathite clans were to camp on the south side of the tabernacle. Remember, the most important directions go east, south, west, and north. The leader of the families of the Kohathite clans was Eliasaphan, son of Uzziel. They were responsible for the care of the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altars, the articles of the sanctuary used in the ministering, the curtain, I'm assuming that's the veil in front of the Ark of the Covenant, I don't know exactly though, and everything related to their use. The chief leader of the Levites was Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest. And he will someday be the high priest. Right now Aaron's still alive, so Eleazar is not the high priest. But once Aaron dies, Eleazar will be the next high priest. He was appointed over those who were responsible for the care of the sanctuary. So these are the most important articles of the whole bunch. These guys were responsible for carrying the utensils that were used in the worship services and the ritual offerings and all that. They even carried the ark. They didn't actually touch them, though. We'll find out later on that the priests themselves touched these objects and then wrapped them up in blankets and stuff. And then the Kohathites would carry them while they were wrapped up in blankets. So these men were not actually allowed to touch the holy objects themselves. But they were responsible for carrying them. Now, to me, this seems almost like a punishment. I have to admit, I don't have the same perspective these guys have. To me, it seems like they're being kind of relegated to a lower class of citizen because they can't actually touch the things they're supposed to carry. All they're allowed to do is literally put these things on their shoulders and carry them around, but they're not actually allowed to touch them. That, to me, almost seems like a snub. That's not how they took it, though. In fact, later on, some of these people are going to make a rebellion because they want more than that. They think that they've been shafted of the most important duties. To Merari, I would feel like I've been kind of almost relegated to a slave role here, but that's not how they took it. To Merari belong the clans of the Malites and the Mushites. These are the Merarite clans. The number of all the males a month old or more who were counted was 6,200. The leader of the families of the Merarite clans was Zuriel, son of Abihail. They were to camp on the north side of the tabernacle, so the least important side. The Merarites are appointed to take care of the frames of the tabernacle, its crossbars, posts, bases, all its equipment, and everything related to their use, as well as the posts of the surrounding courtyard with their bases, tent pegs, and ropes. So they carried the hardware that held up the rest of the tent, basically. So there's three groups of people here. You have one group of people, the Gershonites, who are carrying the fabric of the tent material itself. You have the Kohathites, who are carrying the utensils that were used in the worship services, including the Ark of the Covenant. And then you have the Merarites, who are carrying the frames of the curtains, the posts, and basically we would call them the studs today. It's like the inner workings of the tent. Today we would call them like the studs that help set up the frame of the house. Moses and Aaron and his sons were to camp to the east of the tabernacle. That's the most important side. Toward the sunrise, in front of the tent of meeting. They are responsible for the care of the sanctuary on behalf of the Israelites. Anyone else who approached the sanctuary was to be put to death. The total number of Levites counted at the Lord's command by Moses and Aaron, according to their clans, including every male a month old or more, was 22,000. The Lord said to Moses, "Count all the firstborn Israelite males who are a month old or more, and make a list of their names. Take the Levites for me in place of all the firstborn of the Israelites, and the livestock of the Levites in place of all the firstborn of the livestock of the Israelites. I am the Lord." So Moses counted all the firstborn of the Israelites as the Lord commanded him. The total number of firstborn males a month old or more, listed by name, was 22,273. That's a specific number. The Lord also said to, that's important because of what's going to be written next. I think before we've been getting rounded off numbers, but this number is not rounded off. This number is very specific. But there's a reason for that, as we'll find out here. The Lord also said to Moses, "Take the Levites in place of all the firstborn of Israel, and the livestock of the Levites in place of their livestock. The Levites are to be mine. I am the Lord. To redeem the 273 firstborn Israelites who exceed the number of the Levites, collect 5 shekels for each one, according to the sanctuary shekel, which weighs 20 gerahs. Give the money for the redemption of the additional Israelites to Aaron and his sons." So Moses collected the redemption money from those who exceeded the number redeemed by the Levites. From the firstborn of the Israelites, he collected silver weighing 1,365 shekels, according to the sanctuary shekel. A shekel was a unit of weight in this day and time. Moses, according to my footnotes down here, a shekel was about, I don't know. At any rate, a shekel was a unit of weight this time. Moses gave the redemption money to Aaron and his sons, as he was commanded by the word of the Lord. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this concept of the firstborn being redeemed, being purchased back, and what this means to their society as a whole. Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about a statistical anomaly here. So the total number of Levites ends up every male a month old or more. And again, the criteria for the Levites is not 20 years and up, because they're not going to be part of the army. It's a month old or more, was 22,000. So for everybody else, all the rest of the tribes, the firstborn males, was 22,273. So there's a surplus of 273. First of all, there is a numbers problem here, because we read earlier that the whole army was 600,000 plus men. And now we're reading that there's only 22,273 firstborns in that bunch. So there's a huge difference here. There's two ways. I think I read somewhere that for there to be, if these numbers are both completely consistent with each other, then each of these firstborn males had an average of 26 brothers. So that's obviously not reasonable. So there's two solutions here. Either one goes back to what I said earlier about the original 600,000 number being an exaggeration of a multiple of 7 or 10 possibly, and the actual number is actually 7 or 10 times less than that. That's one possible solution. So there, instead of a 600,000 man army, it was a 60,000 man army, which meant that every firstborn male would have had a couple of brothers instead of 26. Not to include, not to mention sisters or whatever. They're not even included here. That's one possible. That's one possibility. The 22,273 number, I think, is specific. All the other numbers have been rounded off, as we can see. This one, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't all be a factor, a multiple of 10 or 50 or 100. The Levites may have ended up being exactly 22,000. It's possible. But the others, I would accept that happening maybe by chance on occasion. I don't accept that happening in all 13 instances of every grouping, all ending up being a multiple of 50 or 10 or 100. So the 22,273 number to me is probably the most specific and concrete one. It could be the 600,000 number from earlier is an exaggeration. and that it's really 60,000 or something like that. If that number is being purposely inflated by a multiple of 7 or 10, then the actual number, of course, is divided by 7 or 10. So far less. And say, that's possible. Now, some people today, I don't know. I can't prove that. I don't know if that's the truth or not. I do think that's a possibility, and I'm willing to accept that as a possibility. Some people today are simply not willing to accept that. There are some people today whose concept of inerrancy they refuse to even consider a possibility like that because they've made up in their minds. To them, that would be an error. To them, that means the Bible has an error in it because they don't. That violates what they believe to be the doctrine of inerrancy. Again, that's not a textual problem. That's our problem. If that is an issue, I would advise anybody who really makes a big deal about that to consider whether the problem really is the text or whether the problem is that we have a standard or a definition of something that maybe we're being a little bit too unreasonable about. Or the possibility is that these firstborn males were only the ones born since they left Egypt. That the counting of the firstborn male, it doesn't say that though. It doesn't say that they only included the firstborn males that were born since they left Egypt. That's possible they may have done that. If you really have a hard time with the idea the 600,000 figure may be deliberately exaggerated, and to the Bible writers that would not have been a problem. If that just makes your head explode and you can't handle that at all, then I think your explanation would be that even though the text doesn't say this, and there's nothing in the text indicating this, so you're still making an assumption where the text does not allow you to make an assumption by itself. The other explanation could be that these are the males, the baby boys is what they would be, babies who have been born in the year plus since they left Egypt. That's possible. Again, the text doesn't say that. The text doesn't even really hint at that. Like, there's nothing in the text indicating that, but that is a possibility. The text doesn't always say what we want it to say. Okay, there are lots of details that are left out, especially in these historical books. There are lots of details that are left out. So if we want to include that detail, I think we can, but we have to do so with the note that we are including a detail the Bible does not include. So we're still kind of adding to something that we consider to be inerrant. So somewhere along the lines there is a problem here, okay? Some piece of information has not been recorded or left for us, which is causing us to have trouble with. One of three things is the case here. The number is deliberately exaggerated, or this census of the firstborn males was only of those born since they left Egypt, which the text doesn't say, or every firstborn Israelite male had a reproductive weight which has never been seen anywhere in history. Okay, Israel was producing sons and daughters, too, who aren't even included here, at a rate that's never even been hinted at anywhere else in history, of an average of 26 sons per family. Which the text doesn't say that either. Like, the text doesn't indicate that either. So somewhere along the lines, there's an issue here. There is a detail of some kind that is missing that did not get included in our text. That was not, the Holy Spirit did not see fit to give us to explain how to reconcile these outrageously disparate numbers. So whatever we do to solve that problem, we're going to be taking a step beyond what the Word actually provides for us, because it doesn't give us the answer in itself. So I don't know how you would. I don't hold the doctrine of inerrancy the way that some people today do. I think people really define that in an overly serious, overly literal fashion, and refuse to even. Again, you tell them, you point this out to them, and they'll just scream at you. They'll just get mad, and their heads will explode. So I don't hold to that. But if you do, okay, no matter how you try to resolve this issue, you're going to be going beyond what the actual text of the Bible says, because you're going to be filling in a detail that is not included in the actual text.